So we are starting lecture number 6 of transport phenomenon. And today's topic is thermal conductivity. So I'll be starting my lecture with this very simple question. You have a piece of wood in your room where you are sitting, and you have a piece of iron or any metal in your room where you are sitting. Just try to touch both of them. And try to figure out which has the higher temperature and which one has the lower temperature. Try to figure out. Just touch both of them, which are just sitting there, not on the stove, not the piece of iron on the stove, but just piece of iron is somewhere around in your room, maybe at your table or chair or somewhere, and piece of wood is also there. If you are sleeping on the bed and watching my lecture, then maybe you can touch the wood of the bed, and you can find out what is your inference, what is your conclusion after this experiment, this small experiment. Try to figure out which has the lower temperature, which has the higher temperature. Try to figure out which feels like at a lower temperature. A simple experiment we usually do. Yes? Anybody else? Anybody? Not anybody else? Oh, you don't have wood and metal in your room or what?
Iron feels cold.
Iron feels colder. Yes, iron feels colder.
So to be honest, both are at the same temperature, I think.
Yes, you are right. Both are at room temperatures because both are in the room. So they both are at some equal temperature, but still some material feels colder and some material feels hotter. So it is the dilemma that we are going to be studying today. The culprit of this feeling is thermal conductivity, because both the materials has different thermal conductivity. That's why they appear to be hotter or colder than each other, but actually both are at the room temperature, same temperature. Yes, anybody has any question? Okay. Yes, so both of them are at the same temperature but feels differently because of the culprit named thermal conductivity. And we are going to study thermal conductivity using statistical mechanics. We are going to try and derive some formulas of thermal conductivity using statistical mechanics. So before that, let me just clarify how the thermal conduction processes occur. How does thermal conduction process occur? It is just in the same way. If you have a bar or a rod, you can put one end of a bar or a rod at some temperature T1. This is a reservoir temperature. This is called a reservoir temperature. What do we mean by reservoir temperature? This temperature will not change. By reservoir, what we mean is it has enough energy to continuously supply the temperature. If me and Bill Gates have a monetized relation, then he is a reservoir for money. So he can give me money, he can keep on giving me money. His money won't be over. If he gives me 10,000, 15,000 per day, his money won't be over. So he is kind of reservoir, but ideal reservoir is its energy will never change, so its temperature will never change. There is another reservoir of temperature T2 placed at this end. Another reservoir or another material. Let us say if this end is put in the ice box and this is put on the stove. So there are two different temperatures. If this temperature is higher, so if T1 is higher than T2, what happens is the kinetic energy of the electrons near to this plate. If this is a metal, let us consider this is a metal, kinetic energy of electrons is higher in this region. So they will collide with the electrons in this region. They will transport some energy. Then these electrons will transport some energy to next generation of electrons. They will transport. And in this way, the energy will be transported. And this transportation of energy due to the temperature difference is called heat. And this is called heat conduction. These electrons will be oscillating on its place. These electrons will also be oscillating, and because of its kinetic energy, its kinetic energy will also increase, and his kinetic energy will also increase, and this process will keep on happening because of temperature difference between two ends of a metal. Or you can say, if this is not a metal, you can have a gas box. You can have a box where there are so many gas molecules. Then also these things happen. So these things happens because of temperature gradient, because the temperature falls. So these things happens because of temperature gradient, and this is called conduction of heat. This is called conduction of heat. Sorry, I have to admit somebody. Yes. Okay. Yes, this is called conduction of heat. Now, what I want to tell is, what really we should be saying is, because of this non-uniformity of the temperature along the rod, there is a non-equilibrium condition. And because there is a non-equilibrium condition, we are going to use non-equilibrium statistical mechanics, and that's why that's how we are going to use apply our ideas of statistical mechanics into this particular problem of heat conduction and try to find out the thermal conductivity in this problem. So this is my purpose of this lecture, to find out thermal conductivity using statistical consideration. So it is again continuation of the laboratory of statistical mechanics. So this is non-equilibrium condition, and the system tries to be in equilibrium by flowing the heat or heat energy from one end to the other end. So this is how it happens. The heat transfer happens because of temperature gradient. Now, if we consider a plane, if we consider this direction as z-axis, z direction. If we consider this direction as z direction, and if we consider a plane z equal to constant, if we consider a plane which is z equal to constant, then we can define something called heat flux density Qz, heat flux density Qz, which means heat crossing unit area per unit time of the plane z equal to constant. That plane that we have drawn, the amount of heat that passes from here to here per unit volume, per unit area, per unit time is called heat flux density Qz, and it is denoted by Qz. This is the understanding of it, that heat crossing per unit area per unit time from this plane. It is not of this plane, from this plane, from the plane z equal to constant. And now for a steady state, what do I mean by steady state? When there is no temperature gradient. When there is no temperature gradient, what do you expect? We are just trying to understand when there is no temperature gradient. Both the ends are at same temperature. Then there will be no heat flow. So that's why Qz has to be 0 in steady state. But we are particularly interested in non-equilibrium state, when there is a temperature gradient. And at that point, in steady state, these things happen. And in non-uniform temperature, if this is a bar where we have some dilute gas, we will derive it for dilute gas, but for small temperature gradient, this end is at reservoir T1. I'm sorry for my bad drawing. Yes, if this end is at reservoir temperature T1 and this end is at reservoir temperature T2, then what will happen is, for small temperature gradient dt by dz, this direction we are going to consider as z direction. So for small temperature gradient, what do you expect? The heat flux, what do you expect for this? Heat flux density, it should be proportional to dt by dz. Because if you have more temperature gradient for a unit change in length, if you have more change in temperature, then heat will flow by a larger amount. So what we expect is heat per unit area should be proportional to dt by dz. And if it is proportional to dt by dz for any material whatsoever, you can take any material, you can put some that material in some temperature gradient and heat will start flowing. Any material will do that. But then why wood transfers heat? Because your hand and because your body is at a different temperature, and the piece of wood or iron was at a different temperature. So there was a temperature gradient when you touched that particular object. And because of that temperature gradient, you felt something hot or cold. But that heat flow from the body or from your body to that object, or from the object to your body, was different in both the bodies. So what is material dependent quantity in this proportionality constant? It is nothing but thermal conductivity. And we put a minus sign here for obvious reasons. So this is called expression for heat flux density. This kappa z is called coefficient of thermal conductivity, and it is specific to different materials because wood has some different coefficient and metal has some different coefficient. Every metal has some different coefficient. So this kappa z is different for different materials, and for every material the heat transport is proportional to del T by del Z, the temperature gradient. So what will be my purpose in this lecture? I'll be trying to apply some statistical mechanics in some system where I'll be trying to find out the net heat transported or net energy transported in some through some unit area per unit time. And if I'll find that, I'll try to write it as something times del T by del Z, and that something I'll compare with this coefficient of thermal conductivity. So this will be my roadway to this lecture, and this lecture will be really very small, and it is material dependent. I just told, but I want to write it. It is material dependent, this guys. So in this Z direction. Now what I will do is I want to study thermal conductivity using statistical consideration. For simple case of dilute gas, let us put some dilute gas in this whole bar, and let us have those both ends at different temperature T2 and T1. This at T1 and this at T2, and let us take few planes. This plane is Z at Z equal to Z. So this plane is some distance away. Let us take this plane as some distance away. Let us say that distance is L. So this plane is a distance at distance Z plus L, and this plane is at distance Z minus L. What I want to do is, if there are some particles of gas on this plane, they will come with some energy and collide with this plane and cross this plane. And there are some particles of gas in this plane also. They will also be moving randomly. Some of them will come in this side and will cross this plane with some energy. So the difference of both those particles' energy will give me net energy passing through this plane, and that will be my heat flux density through this plane if I take the unit area of this plane. So this is my way. So some molecules cross this plane from left to right. Some molecules cross this plane from left to right, because molecules, if this is simple dilute gas, then some molecules are crossing they are moving randomly. So some molecules are crossing this plane from left to right direction. Some molecules are coming and crossing this plane Z equal to Z from right to left direction. Okay, and the temperature at different Z is different because temperature gradient is there. So let me define the temperature at Z equal to Z equals to T of Z. Let me define the temperature at Z plus L as T of Z plus L, and this temperature as T of Z minus L. This is very creative nomenclature, I know, but we will stick to it. It is very simple. Yes. So some molecules cross the plane like this, and we want to find the net energy which is crossing the plane Z equal to Z, some plane in between. And suppose the temperature gradient del T by del Z is negative. What does it mean? Okay, why there is negative sign? Can somebody tell me why is there this negative sign? I told that it is for obvious reasons, but is it obvious to you?
Heat flows from higher temperature to lower temperature. That's...
Yes. So why is negative sign required?
I mean, if the heat flows from higher temperature to lower temperature, that will take the positive direction of the heat. Then the temperature gradient will be negative. That's why.
Temperature gradient would be negative.
If
yes.
we take
if we take temperature gradient negative,
it is from higher to lower. So if we take the positive direction of the heat, temperature gradient will be negative. So that's why we have to get that positive.
Okay. So what he said is, let me rephrase it a little bit. If somehow it happens that if Z increases, when Z increases and temperature decreases, then this quantity will be negative, because temperature will flow from higher to lower end. And that's why we want to keep this coefficient of thermal conductivity always positive. That's why we are using additional negative sign to compensate these guys' negativity. to just compensate that. So we want to keep the coefficient of thermal conductivity always positive. Yes, very good answer. And suppose we are just saying that del T by del Z is negative, means as we increase our Z in this direction, we are increasing our Z, the temperature is decreasing. That is what I want to mean. As we increase the Z, the temperature is decreasing, means this temperature is, this end is at a high temperature and this end is at low temperature, which means the energy will be, net energy will be flowing from this direction to this direction. Net energy flow. Means all the particles sitting on this plane will have less energy compared to all the particles sitting on this plane. These guys have more energy. They are also going in this direction, they are also coming in this direction, but these guys are going to have more energy, these guys are going to have less energy. I hope everybody understands this point. So it is very subtle, but it is very important for our discussion. Suppose this happens, then net energy flows in this direction and these guys have less energy sitting on this plane. These guys have relatively more energy compared to them because the temperature is higher here. Okay, so if this happens, today's class is really easy, really very easy. If this happens, let me define some parameters that we defined last time. It is number density, mean number density, I should say. Why am I using the word mean? I hope you understand. This is mean velocity in Z direction. Mean velocity in Z direction. This is the Z direction. I have just drawn three planes, Z equal to Z. This is Z equal to Z plus L. And this is Z equal to Z minus L. These are three planes I have just drawn here. And in this direction, it is Z direction. So velocity, mean velocity in Z direction is given. Now, what happens is, now I'm using statistical mechanics for the first time. For this gas, for the dilute gas, there is no reason for each the molecules of the gas to interact with each other. So they will move randomly. If they are moving randomly, then I can say that 1/3 of the molecule are moving in X direction, 1/3 of the molecules are moving in Y direction, and 1/3 of the molecules are moving in Z direction. Only 1/3 are moving in the Z direction. And from that 1/3 molecules moving in Z direction, half of them are moving in positive Z direction. Half of them are moving in positive Z direction, means 1/6 of them are moving in positive Z direction, and 1/6 of them are moving in negative Z direction. This is what statistical mechanics is. If we apply this much statistical mechanics to this problem, we are through. What I want to tell is, if there is the number density of particle is n, then 1/3 of the total molecules are moving in Z direction, and 1/6 of them, means half of those are moving in positive Z and half of those are moving in negative Z. So 1/6 are moving in both the directions. This is really very simple looking. Okay, so 1/6 of n guys, 1/6 of n guys are moving from this side to there, and 1/6 of n guys are moving from right to left and left to right. Okay, yes. So all of them will come here because these guys have some more energy, these guys have some less energy. But how many particles will be coming and crossing this area per unit time? As I told, this is the mean velocity in Z direction. From the yesterday's class, we can say that mean energy transported, and since, okay, let me define something else also. This is energy of the particles sitting on the plane Z plus L is called epsilon Z plus L. Energy of the particle sitting on the plane Z equal to Z is called epsilon Z, and mean energy of the particle sitting on the plane Z minus L is called epsilon of Z minus L. I'm just defining a few parameters here. I want to just name those things. Mean energy of the molecule at plane Z equal to Z. It represents the mean energy. So all the particles here have mean energy this much, mean energy this much, and mean energy this much. So now what I want to say is mean energy transported, total mean energy transported. So since the heat flow is in left to right direction, since the total energy flow is in left to right direction, so since the total energy flow is in this direction, is in left to right direction. So what can I say is that particles sitting here have more energy compared to the particles sitting here. That means epsilon of z minus L is greater than epsilon of z plus L. That's why I can say, maybe in a new slide, that epsilon of z minus L is greater than epsilon of z plus L. So that this is a very simple result, but we will be needing that result. And where will we needing that result? Here. So mean energy transported per unit area per unit time across the plane from left to right is equal to, from left to right is equal to 1/6 of NV epsilon of Z minus L, and from right to left is equal to 1/6 of NV epsilon of Z plus L. Are we clear on this 1/6 of N into V? It means the number of particles crossing that particular plane, and each particle has this much of energy. So what do I mean is, each number of particles crossing this plane per unit time from left to right direction is 1/6 of N times its mean velocity in Z direction, mean speed in Z direction. So 1/6 of N into V. That is number of particles crossing this plane per unit time. And each particle has energy epsilon of Z minus L. So total energy crossing this plane from left to right is multiplication of these two guys, and from right to left is multiplication of these two guys. And therefore net energy, net flux of energy, which we will call Q of Z, is equal to 1/6 of N times V. And which one is bigger? From left to right, it is bigger flow of it, and this one is smaller. So what we will do is epsilon of Z minus L minus epsilon of Z plus L. There are a lot of typing errors in this section in your book by B.B. Loud. So there are 2 or 3 typing errors. So I think you should follow this derivation, even if some derivation is there in your book. You should follow this derivation. It is a little bit more clearer. So there are some typing errors. You will correct them by seeing this. Okay. Now, for small l, what can I write for epsilon of Z minus L, Z minus or plus L? Can I write it as epsilon of Z minus or plus L times del epsilon of Z upon del Z? Can I write this? I know that you have written this thing in your classical mechanics somewhere, but just give me confirmation that you know this thing. For small l, you can write this, because the separation between those planes, even if we consider them separate planes, they are really very small, of the order of mean free path, because they are of the order of mean free path. You are very silent, students.
Sir, I'm not getting this. Can you please?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for bringing this up. Thank you very much. Kindly say something. If you don't understand, kindly ask. Yes, thank you very much for bringing this up. It is just the simple definition of differentiation that you used to study. This is the definition of differentiation that you used to study. Now, for a small h, you are anyways not using this limit h tends to 0, because h is anyway smaller. That's why you can multiply this h here. So you can write f of x plus h equals to h. You can bring this f of x here. So f of x plus h times del f by del x. This is the from the definition of differentiation. So whenever I was a student, I thought it's as some kind of Taylor series, but it is not Taylor series. It is just the simple definition of differentiation. We are just using the fact that L is small, because we can use the limit L tends to 0. So since L is small, we can use this. Now, I hope you are understanding.
Yes, sir.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Somebody
Yes,
of you
thank
should
you.
ask. Yes, thank you. So somebody of you should ask. Keep on asking doubts if you don't understand. Always harass the teacher. Harass him very much. He should come and prepare. I should be scared to come to you guys before preparation. That should be my status. But you are not asking any questions, so I am coming. I can come unprepared. It won't matter if I can come unprepared. Also, you guys won't be asking any questions. You should ask questions.
The minus plus, Kaida.
Okay, yes. So you can write the same definition, something like this also. F of x minus h, f of x minus f of x minus h upon h is equals to del f by del x. These both are the same definitions. This is x plus h minus x, and this is x minus x plus x minus h. So both are the same definitions. So you can now use this, make this as a subject.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Yes, so it is not a Taylor series, it is just the definition of differentiation. And for small l, we can use this. And if you use this relation in both of these places, at both of these places, because l is smaller, both of these places, what will happen is epsilon z will be here, minus of something, minus in bracket epsilon z, and plus of something, and because that minus will cancel that minus, epsilon z will be cancelled out, and minus of 2 times L times del Ez by del Z will remain. If you do the simple algebra, just putting it at both the places. That's what you need to do. If you do the simple algebra, what you will get is Qz is going to be equal to, there is again a typing error at this point in your book. Actually, your book has not written it properly, but there is some typing error here also. 16 times NV times 2 times L into del E by del Z. It will be minus of 16 times N times V times 2 times L times del epsilon by del Z. From where this minus came, it came from the putting these values. It came from after putting these values. You need to put them, because this is also minus for the first term. For the second term, because of this minus, it will become minus. So it is minus 2 times something. And that's what I have written. I should, or I know that you guys won't be looking at these notes before the day of exam. I'll be putting minus here because you can understand on the day of exam. Yes. So we can cancel this with this, and it is very simple. N times V times L times del E by del Z. And I can change this del E by del Z with del E by del T and del T by del Z. And this guy I know from thermodynamics. It is specific heat per molecule. It is specific heat per molecule I know from thermodynamics. So I can say that it is nothing but minus of 1/3 NVL CV, specific heat per unit volume, into del T by del Z. And now I can see that. I can see some relation here. This part, I have found out Q of Z using simple statistical mechanics. I found out that Q of Z is indeed proportional to del T by del Z, and that proportionality constant is nothing but kappa T, thermal conductivity. It is kappa T, and this is kappa T. What is CV? I just want to make sure that we write it properly. CV is heat capacity. In your book, it is written as specific heat per molecule, but specific heat is anyways per molecule. But the more correct explanation is heat capacity at constant volume per molecule. This should be the more correct representation, not specific heat. So try to correct this part also. And this kappa T is nothing but the thermal conductivity. So I'm just writing the expression for thermal conductivity, 1/3 N times V times L times CV. This is thermal conductivity. If we consider the simple dilute gas, dilute gas, I hope you guys know that del E by del T at constant volume becomes this heat capacity. You guys have studied that much of thermodynamics. And if you have not, then try to look into your 12th standard textbooks. It is written there. Yes. So if we consider simple dilute gas, this is the thermal compressibility. Now starts the story. This is the derivation. We have used some statistical mechanics. We found out some relation. Now starts the physics. This was the mathematics. Now starts the actual physics. This guy, Paul Rudd, that we talked about yesterday, he used the free electron theory, the gas theory. He applied the Boltzmann statistics. Boltzmann made it for gas particles, but he applied the same Boltzmann statistics into the electrons in a solid. So he applied this Boltzmann statistics to the electron in the solid, and those electrons, by applying that, he found out some fantastic results for electrical conductivity. We studied that in the last class, but in this class, what we are going to see is that Paul Rudd. Yes.
Sir, I have a doubt.
Yes.
Sir, why we can apply this only for dilute gas?
Yes. We have applied it for dilute gas, so it is not necessary that you have to do the same derivation for dilute gas, but we have done this derivation for dilute gas. So in case of any randomly moving set of particles which are not interacting, because dilute gas is not interacting. So any set of particles which are not interacting with each other, you can apply the same theory.
Okay.
Because they have to move randomly for this thing to hold, that 1/6 of them are going in this direction and 1/6 of them are going in this direction. They have to move randomly for that. Because they are moving randomly, we are using the symmetry of the universe and telling that 1/6 of them and 1/6 of them. If you use this much, then everything is done. So we have to use, we can use it for any particles which are randomly moving.
How sure we can be that if they are moving randomly, they will not interact, or if they are interacting, they have to move random?
No.
Random.
Actually, dilute gas, by dilute gas means it is very low density gas. So two molecules of the gas are really very apart from each other. So actually their potential centers are very, they are not actually having that much big potential range to attract or repel other molecules, other gas molecules. So they are interacting with, we can assume that they are interacting only when they are colliding. So there is no potential of them as such, because they are really very far apart if we are talking about dilute gas or ideal gas. So that's how we are applying this theory. So if they are dilute, that doesn't mean that they are moving randomly, but because they are not interacting because of they are dilute, that means they are moving randomly. If they are interacting, then this interaction will affect their movement.
Like, is there any relation of, like, if there is some relaxation time, then at this much time they will not be if this much time is there between collisions, then we can assume that they are not interacting, or there is very less interaction, or if time is very high or very low, then they must be interacting.
Oh yes,
there is something relation between the
so I hope your question is that is there any a proper number above which we can say that if the molecules have relaxation time greater than this, then they are not interacting, less
Yes.
than this? Okay, so I don't know if there is a number or not, but generally what we do is I don't know. Actually, the correct answer of your question is that I don't know if there is a number or not, but what we do generally is we try to apply some assumptions on this theory and try to derive something. Actually what we are studying is not today's science. It is done 150 years ago, 120 years ago. So what we want to do is we want to apply simple statistical mechanics with so many assumptions, right, that even if we get our answer in the range of the actual answer, we are happy. It is a win, like yesterday. So actually we are not interested in exact answer. So that's why I don't know if the actual gas is interacting or not, or is there any relation, because actually you can't have anything which is not interacting. You can't have, because gravity itself is a infinite range force. So each and every molecule of the gas has its own gravity and gravitational field. So it is infinitely infinite range force. So you can't have anything which is actually free and non-interacting. You can't have anything. So this is really a very big approximation. And I still don't know if I have answered your question or not. But
no, sir. It is no. It is. I think it is bit clear.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so this Paul Rudd, this guy with a very big mustache, he applied the same theory of Boltzmann statistics to find the electrical conductivity, and then he moved ahead with a thermal conductivity also, and he applied the same gas dilute gas model to the electron in the metal, and he coined the term electron gas theory. Okay, so it is he considered those electrons in the metal as free electrons, and he considered them as free electrons behaving as a gas. So he tried to apply the same theory. He came to this equation, and then he tried to apply this equation directly to the electrons in the gas. He tried to apply the same equation directly to the electrons in the gas. So what happened was, he knew that for gas, specific heat at constant volume is 3/2 kBT. kb, sorry, it is 3/2 kb for gases. So he applied this value directly to the electron in the solid. I know this is crude and this should not happen, but he applied it directly just to see that what happens. So CV he applied for gas. We know that CV is 3/2 kb, but he applied this directly to the electron in the solid. And then there was another thing. Actually, there are two things. One is average velocity. So he used the formula for average velocity as √8 kT over pi m. This is nothing but Maxwell speed distribution. From this is average velocity from Maxwell speed distribution. So if you guys don't know what Maxwell speed distribution is, or what is Maxwell's velocity distribution or anything, I really advise you to go through the chapter number 3 of BB Loud. There is some Maxwell distribution given, and if you don't find anything appealing to you, you can come to me with specific doubts and I will help you out. But you should read that chapter. Even if not from BB Loud, I'll give you some, there is some other book we talked about, Blundell and Blundell. So you can read it from Blundell and Blundell. It is a really very good book. So you can read it from Blundell and Blundell. This is the average speed of molecules from Maxwell speed distribution. And he applied both of these things, which were actually derived for gas, onto the electrons in the solid. And what he found out was kappa T is equal to 4 by pi n tau square, n tau kb square, I'm sorry. N tau kb square. You know that I have also written this equation, so I'm not expecting you to memorize them. But if the need is there, you can remember these two equations because they are usually routinely applicable. I don't want you to memorize this equation. This just comes as a part of derivation. You just put these values into this equation and you get this kb square T over m. This is kappa T. This is the expression for kappa T. Here, tau is the relaxation time, and tau we have written from L upon average velocity. In place of L upon average velocity, we have written tau, or in place of L, we have written average velocity into tau. Tau is the relaxation time. And Rudd assumed that the planes that we were talking about, which were apart from each other, are apart from each other by the measure of L, were apart from each other by the measure of L, and he considered this L of the order of mean free path. He considered L of the order of mean free path, and then he derived this expression of kappa T, and from this, there is something wonderful coming up. From this, he found out the ratio of kappa T by sigma EL, which is electrical conductivity, and what he found out was astonishingly very good. What was the expression for electrical conductivity, if you remember from the last class? Does anybody of you remember? The simple expression in terms of tau, n square tau by
n square tau by m.
By m. N square tau by m, yes. So it is NQ square tau by m, and kappa T we just found out for the gas, 4 by pi n tau kb square T. T over M, 4 by pi, sorry, here, and over M. Now you can cancel those things which you don't like, and eventually you will find that this number becomes equal to 4 by pi kb by q whole square into T. Therefore, oh, this is not equal to L, I'm sorry. Therefore, we can say that kappa T, which is thermal conductivity, and electrical conductivity's ratio is nothing but some number times the absolute temperature. And this relation is known as Weidmann-Franz law. I know that you have studied this in your solid state physics. So this relation is known as the Weidmann-Franz law. This L is nothing but this constant which is appearing here. It is known as the Lorentz number. So I'll be talking a little bit about this guy. Actually, let's talk about this guy right now. So L is nothing but Lorentz number. It is called as Lorentz number, and it was the biggest success of Drude's model. Actually, before the time of Drude, from last 50 years, people were knowing something, that the ratio of thermal conductivity and electrical conductivity, when they measured it experimentally, it came out to be constant, because they were measuring it for the room temperature for any substance. You take metal or wood or anything, when you try to measure its ratio of its thermal conductivity and electrical conductivity experimentally, you found out that ratio to be constant, because the temperature was also constant when everything was measured at room temperature. So this constant ratio was measured by Lorentz. It is not the same Lorentz as in Lorentz force, it is some other Lorentz, but the ratio was given the name of Lorentz by the name of Lorentz number, and it was constant. It was known from last 50 years that this ratio is constant, and from this number we can say that if our calculation of material is true, then the Lorentz number should be something like this. And if I calculate using the number of kb and q as the charge of electron, this number comes out to be, this is the physics, comes out to be somewhere around 0.94 into 10 to the power minus 8. I have done the calculation, watt ohm per meter square, per Kelvin square. Watt ohm per Kelvin square. And this Lorentz number comes out to be something like this, which is nothing but equal to 1 into 10 to the power minus 8 watt ohm per Kelvin square. And what happens is actual values which were known experimentally at that time for lithium, suppose, and for sodium, are very near to it. I'm just using the unit SI in place of this. Actual values for L for lithium is 2.22 into 10 to the power minus 8, and for sodium is 2.12 into 10 to the power minus 8 SI. So this was a very, very big success, because you used so many approximations. You first calculated it for non-interacting gas and then applied it to the electron, where electron is fermion. You have actually, what you have considered is all the electrons are taking part equally in the conduction process, but in reality not all the electrons are taking part in the conduction process. Only those electrons which are near the Fermi surface that we talked about yesterday are taking part in the conduction process, the thermal conduction also. But we have considered that all the electrons are taking part, we have considered them as the gas, and still we are getting this very good approximated number, which is in the order of 10 to the power minus 8. It is really, really big win, big success, if we think about that time. So Drude was very famous suddenly in all the scientists. So Drude was really very famous, and what he found out was that these actual values are till then there was no concept of fermion. Till then no quantum mechanics was developed. So nobody knew that electron is a fermion, and to get to the actual values we have to do something else and not consider electron as the free gas. No quantum mechanics was there. But after that, this is a very good result, but still after that, if you take quantum mechanics into account, then what you know that only the electrons which are on the Fermi surface take part in the conduction process. Conduction process. And if you apply the quantum mechanical treatment, because these guys have the mean free path of the order of LF, velocity, EF, energy, epsilon F. So these guys, these electrons near the Fermi surface have these properties, and that's why we can say that for them kappa T is nothing but 1/3 of nv in place of v, its velocity, average velocity is the Fermi velocity, nv, L, and cv. And in place of cv, what we can write is, pi square k square t over 2 epsilon f. Now I can't derive this expression because this expression, this much in place of cv that I have written, is from your 10th chapter, and from your 10th chapter of the book. And since we are directly studying the 11th chapter, I also don't suppose that you know this equation directly. So this is from the 10th chapter. If you have studied solid state, I suppose that you have seen this equation in your solid state 5th semester. So this is the equation for specific heat, and from that we can get the expression for kappa T. And from here, what we can do is we can find the ratio of kappa T and the electrical conductivity. Then what we can say is, did somebody ask any question or what? Okay. Yes, from kappa T, if we use this, then we can directly go to the Weidmann-Franz law, and we can take the ratio of electrical conductivity and kappa T, and we can find out this ratio to be pi square by 3 k b square by q square into t. If we use this modified kappa T, where we have considered the quantum mechanics as well, we use this modified kappa T and modified sigma electric, then also we are going to get the same Weidmann-Franz law, but in this case the Lorentz number turn out to be more accurate. And since this Lorentz number turns out to be very much accurate, it turns out to be something like 2 point something and into 10 to the power minus 8 SI unit using this numbers. So we have done a wonderful thing today. I just want to sum up my lecture. It is the end of the lecture, and I just want to sum up my lecture that what just happened, kappa T by electrical thermal conductivity. We just tried to find out the thermal conductivity using statistical considerations. We used so many approximations, and we found out some formula for thermal conductivity. Then we went to the physics part of it and found out that Paul Rudd also found the same formula and applied it to the electrons. We tried to find out what was the Lorentz number found out by him, and it was agreeing very well with the real experimental results. Though this calculation was not correct, as for electron the specific heat is not always 3/2 kBT, because we have studied the specific heat of electrons in solid, and we have known that it was actually explained by Einstein and Dulong-Petit and so many people. So it is not continuously constant for each and every temperature. It is not 3/2 kB. It is different for different temperatures. We have studied this kind of graph for specific heat of atoms, of electron in atoms. So we have studied this graph, and we know that this specific heat is not this much. We have considered this specific heat, but actual specific heat of electrons should be considered in this range. We have considered specific heat much more than its actual value, and we have considered the velocity much less to its actual value, because electrons are so small particles, they move too fast, while the gas molecules are really big particles compared to electrons, and they move too slow compared to the electrons. So we have considered the velocity less than the actual velocity and the CV more than the actual CV. And then we have got the result which was nearly correct, but it is not the actual treatment. Actual treatment is using quantum mechanical considerations. This you have studied in your solid state physics. I just used the facts and formulas from there, and we can find out the kappa T, and we can find out the Weidmann-Franz law still holds here, and the L is more accurate if you use this. But still, we should not forget that kappa T and sigma electrical conductivity both were derived using simple statistical mechanics, very simple statistical mechanics. So if it is more accurate, means we are going very good with our statistical mechanics, and it's a win.